Hi, I'm Peter Foss from DePauw University. I want to thank the conference organizers, the session chair, and my colleagues. Let's get to it. I'm presenting part of a book project examining Pliny the Younger's 2 letters about the AD 79 eruption of Mount Vesuvius. I owe thanks to Michael Reeve for conversations about manuscripts, Brian Hansen for his statistical savvy, and Beth Wilkerson for helping to build a GIS of the pre-eruption Bay of Naples, which will be freely available along with all of the data behind this project. This talk describes a new comprehensive collation of the Vesuvian letters, the construction of a new stemma, or family tree for the source tradition, decipherment of the heretofore mysterious Theta branch of that tradition, and implications for understanding the eruption date in written sources, specifically how options other than August 24th have come about. The traditional stemma for Pliny's letters developed between 1853 and 1963, divided into 8, 9, and 10 book traditions, that is, gamma, alpha/theta, and pi/beta. Of these, we have or know of specific texts that source all the families except one, Theta. So what is Theta? To have the most well-informed text, I scanned 79 of the 80 known extant manuscripts and read many of them in person. The 80th is not accessible, but it's late. It does not affect results. I also included printed editions. I then collated the most variable readings across all of them, recording both the literal readings with abbreviations, spelling, spacing, and restored or normalized readings for each, adding up to nearly a third of all the words in both letters. When complete, the database will exceed 160,000 entries. I have only the later printed editions from letter 620 to finish. The size of this sample made empirical stemmatology possible, and a recursive process of statistical analysis and traditional comparison of readings led, after 4 years, to drafting a new and far more detailed family tree. The new stemma includes all extant and hypothesized texts down to the present day. The stemma is provisional. I understand that perhaps as little as 10% of manuscripts have survived. Also, it is most accurate for the Vesuvian letters. Additional work will be required for the entire epistulae, although I also selectively collated letters in books 1, 5, and 8. It's a start, but I think it's safe to say that while previous scholars did an amazing job with a relatively small number of texts, a new full critical edition of the epistulae will be necessary. But now we know the key texts to collate. In Italy, during the 15th century, only one manuscript contained the Vesuvian letters, Gamma. It was furiously copied after being rediscovered at Verona in 1419, and its descendants comprise 95% of extant Plinian manuscripts. 2 branches are key to our story here. Gamma 3b1, you see on the left, which emerged in the late 1420s, and also revisions made by Lorenzo Valla in Naples around 1438. We'll examine both of them shortly. Though previous scholars had noticed curious clusters of readings, it was Stout who first argued that they comprised another family, which he called Theta. Minors confirmed and refined it, and Theta became canon for the Plinian tradition. Theta's main features seem to be that it made many corrections that matched alpha or pi readings, filled in lacunae from the gamma family, and it also contains some of the Book 8 letters missing entirely from gamma. Still, Theta's origin and nature remained unclear. So let's see what Theta actually is. Credit to Michael Reeve, who provided the solution key for this. First, we need a manuscript written at Rome in October 1453, Vatican Reg Lat 1472, which I'm going to call R1472 from now on. It belongs to the gamma 3b1 branch noted earlier. It had a hypothetical descendant, which I call C naught. Note that it is common to posit hypothetical sources from clues preserved in their descendants. We'll briefly detour to Naples in 1438, where Lorenzo Valla made numerous conjectures to his copy of the letters. His conjectures were insightful. In my sample, he was correct 54% of the time. And his personal copy, which we call Valla, spawned several descendants, most importantly, LL52. Now, Valla brought his personal copy with him when he moved to Rome in 1448. And there, Valla readings were annotated into C naught and then integrated into its descendant C. Now it gets interesting. Before C was bound, Book 8 letters preserved in a Theta source at Rome were appended at the end as Book 9 by the same scribe. It has no other Theta readings. C was a presentation copy to a young Francesco Piccolomini, the future Pope Pius III. C naught then had another descendant, F naught, and it received annotations from Theta, but had no Book 8 because it had already been bound. A descendant of F naught, F, integrated those Theta readings and moved to Naples. We'll see it later. Another offspring of F naught, Q naught, was then copied, but this time in conjunction with full access to Theta, so that it received additional Theta readings as well as the Book 8 letters uniquely set in their proper place between Books 7 and 9. A presentation copy of Q naught, Q, survives from the 1460s. Then, around 1474, Johannes Schuriner's printing press at Rome was preparing an edition, which we call R, to compete with the Venetian Editio Princeps. The editor used as his base text that very same R 1472 that was parent to C naught. He heavily annotated R 1472 with readings from a Theta source. That amended manuscript became R naught. He then added the Book 8 letters from the Theta source as Book 9, directly onto the end of R. Those Book 8 letters then joined the 1476 Naples printing, which also used F. R and Theta were also sources for several later manuscripts and printed copies. Simply put, what Stout and Miners thought was Theta was really the combination of Valla conjectures and a true and increasingly tattered Theta source. Now to the eruption date in the texts. Let's consider our oldest and best sources, independently, from the 10 and 9 book families. The 5th century Pi, preserved in the 1508 Aldus edition and in an extremely rare 1504 Beroaldus edition, which I'm announcing here, as well as 2 9th century Alpha sources, all read the 9th day before the calends of September. That is, August 24th, for the start of the eruption. The formula for Roman dates comes in 2 flavors, ablative and accusative. But the number of days before the month marker, calends, nones, or ides, comes first, and then the month marker as an accusative plural noun, and finally the adjectival month. This is true in 97.1% of all instances in literature through Tacitus. In another 2.2% of cases, the order adapts because of poetic meter. Counting is also inclusive. Both the first and last days are included. For the Gamma and Theta families, the situation is quite different. Those families which shared a common ancestor did not preserve a month name at all, just the number, 9th day, before the calends of blank. The number, nonum, is consistent across all key Gamma subfamilies, except one, Gamma 3b1, which includes the important R1472 manuscript that we've already highlighted. In that branch, we literally see something new, novum, which makes no sense in the context of a date. This happened because an ancestor had a reading ambiguous between nonum and novum. The letters N and U are easily and commonly confused in minuscule script. We can trace that error. I argue that a known copy made by Flavio Biondo between 1424 and 1428 was ambiguous in just this way. Its surviving descendants read either as nonum or novum, variously abbreviated. One of those descendants is R1472, which simply reads new. Here's the diagram that we built before, but now showing readings for the eruption date. R1472 is the key source. Originally, it read new, leading to similar readings in its descendants, which were also influenced by Valla and Theta. Note, the new with the long macron in C and Q may construe November, but that's not clear. But new was definitely altered to November by the editor of the second printed edition, R. Note that this construction is not syntactically correct. It should read calendis Novembribus to indicate November 1st. Let's take an even closer look. First, proof that the R editor used R1472 through a spectacular error. The stylized U beginning usus in R1472 was printed as the nonsensical zisus in R. This mistake occurs nowhere else. Next, R1472 had a sibling, Vatlat 5881. They were both written by the same scribe, Valerius Sanvenantius, in late 1453. He left a space after new in R1472 because the passage was problematic. He subsequently left the same space in Vatlat 5881, but this time he wrote non, perhaps because that abbreviation for nonum made more sense than a mysterious new. Again, there was minuscule ambiguity in their exemplar. How do we know that November is not original to R1472? I compared all 41 examples of EMB, MBR, BRIS, or BRES letter sequences in the original manuscript. Their forward slanted shape and smooth edges do not match the upright stance and sharper nib of the R editor's emendations. Compare, for instance, the EMB of November to a superlinear correction in letter 727-6. Both are quite similar and belong to the emendator. Or, tellingly, compare monentem here and the R editor's gloss above it in 110.7. Finally, We also know how San Venantius wrote months like November and October, because we have his colophon in R 1472, as well as a poem that he signed in 1454. Both of those examples include a backward horizontal slash through the stem of the B and add an R at the end. So the editor of R, the second printed edition in Rome, is responsible for construing fully a November reading. At this point, the 9th day before blank and November 1st were the only options that anyone could read. But because this version of November was in print, despite being not syntactically correct, November got reproduced regularly until the older and less corrupt Alpha and Pi sources arrived to Italy in the first decade of the 16th century, and the August 24th reading became the standard. This might have been the end of the story. The September reading is more reliable, and November 1st should die out. Except, editors of Elder Pliny's Natural History, starting with Assulanus in 1536, used an outdated 1506 edition of Cataneus that still read November. Their editions included letter 6.16 along with letter 3.5 as biographical prefaces about the elder's life and death. The 1608 Dallacampius edition also contained an essay arguing that Elder Pliny hailed from the town of Como. Now, Como rivaled Verona to claim the Plinys, so a Veronese legal scholar named Polycarpus Palermus objected in a 180-page treatise. Polycarpus wanted to know when the elder died, so he listed dates for the second day of the eruption, which is when the elder perished. One of those he got wrong. The third day before the nones of November was November 3rd, not the November 2nd that he wanted to convey. Compounding the error, subsequent scholars took his death dates for the dates of the eruption. At this point, there were 4 dates for the eruption now in circulation, 3 of them clear mistakes. Harduinus mistook the death dates for the eruption dates in his 1685 edition, still relying on the obsolete 1506 text. But in citing Palermus, his own footnote mark was then mistaken by Rosanico for yet another date, 1 Cal November, which is impossible in Latin. Now there were 5 dates, and 4 of them were wrong. Rossini enters the scene in 1797. Archaeological finds led him to doubt an August date, given a simplistic reading of that evidence. So he turned to Cassius Dio's epitomized account of the eruption, and in that account, Dio uses the term phthinoporon, which means the last part of late summer. Following the historian Tillemont, Rossini incorrectly doubled the end part of the word phthin in translating phthinoporon as the end of autumn. This permitted him to start a trend of contriving his own month to fill the gap of the Gamma family, the 9th day before the calends of December, or November 23rd. Now there are 6 dates, 5 of them incorrect. Rossini's invention inspired 2 volcanologists to propose yet another date in 1929, October 24th. This doubled the 9 from the 9th day into the month of November. Options for dates now numbered 7. And the more options there were, the more uncertain the textual date appeared to be. The question was revived in the late 20th century, and the October 24th date now circulates widely, especially after the October 17th inscription was found in the Casa del Giardino at Pompeii in 2018. But that inscription does not indicate a year. It was indoors, and it easily could have been on that wall for a long time. So far, no evidence from inscriptions, coins, studies of wind direction, the grape harvest, pomegranates, or anything else has been specific enough, precise enough, and sufficiently indisputable to challenge what Pliny wrote. I examine all those arguments in the book. Now that may change with future research, of course. My purpose in this paper has been to show that Pliny recorded August 24th as the eruption date and argue that we should cease trying to bend what he wrote. Future challenges must demonstrate that Pliny was simply wrong and not pretend that he wrote something else. Thank you.